Hi everyone, welcome to VMware Explore 2022. I can tell you that after over a decade of attending other conferences by a name we won't mention, that VMware Explore is definitely a mouthful to say. Either way, welcome to the conference. I'm sorry that you couldn't make it in person, but this is going to be a great opportunity for you to view some sessions from VMware Code and check out some great technology. I'm super excited to present this material as I've been dying to do it for years. I feel like in the community of PowerCLI, we've been missing a session like this that dives into the troubleshooting and error handling of PowerCLI and some of the gotchas that come along with it. So with that said, this is code 1865 US. Try this, catch that, finally an explanation on PowerCLI handling. Check out the hashtags down the bottom, share it on your social media, let us know what you think, give me some feedback. I'm always game to hear it. Here's our disclaimer. I want you to read this really quickly. Good job. All right, so we're going to go over who I am. We're going to talk about terminating and non-terminating errors. We're going to talk about ErrorAction thingies. It's a technical term you wouldn't understand. We'll go over what a try and catch is. We'll add in the finally. And then we're going to spend some time. I'm going to try and do my best to go slow since this is a recorded demo over the PowerCLI and API demos. Down at the bottom, you're going to see a link to where this code is. So all of the code in the PowerCLI, API demo, and this slide deck are going to be available inside my GitHub repo. So with that, let's get started. I'm Justin Sider. I'm the CIO of Belay Technologies. I also kind of reference to myself as the PowerShell or Chief PowerShell Officer. You'll probably see that on a couple of conferences you've been to. I have a blog, albeit not that useful this past year with COVID and everything else going, and also with things in my life. So apologize about that, but let's see if we can get that started after VMworld. You can view any of my open source projects on GitHub/JPSider. And then if you have a question for me, you have you want me to look at your code, you want to critique my code, whatever it is, hit me up on Twitter or Slack. You can always find me at JPSider. I'm pretty sure that might work at Gmail too. I do participate in several VMware programs. One of them is vMug Advantage. I highly recommend you do it. You get access to quite a bit of the VMware portfolio. You're able to download those products, install them, not for resale, not for production use, but it's super useful to make sure that you can continue to hone your skills with the VMware product line. I'm a 7-time VMware V expert, and I'm also a VMware Code Coach 20 to 2022, and it's all about evangelism, right? I want to promote the VMware Code brand and help people understand that we are here as an organization and as a group of people to help you. Again, I don't work for VMware, but I love what they do. I love the products that they produce. All of that being said, it would not be possible without the support from my family. So you get to see pictures of me and my wife, and then me and each one of my children kind of doing some things that we enjoy doing together. They're super supportive. I couldn't do it without them. Last but not least, I have a picture of a little Texas outline with a Maryland flag. I've lived my entire life in Maryland up until this year, and we as a family decided that we were just going to move to Texas. We took our jobs with us. And I've been here since about the end of June, and I've loved every single minute of it. People down here have complained about like 40 straight days in the hundreds, and I just absolutely soaked it in. It's great. I'm looking forward to a mild winter and just experiencing all the things that South Texas has to offer. So I'm now in San Antonio. If you're in the area, you want to get together for drinks, you want to talk shop, let me know. Hit me up on Twitter or Slack. I'm happy to talk to you, happy to hang out with you. All right, we're going to jump right into it. I don't have a lot of slides. We'll touch on them quickly, and then we're going to move right into the demos and kind of take our time through it. So, terminating errors. This is what happens when you run a command, the system doesn't like it, and it stops execution. So it's going to stop or halt the execution of your script, and that means that the next lines will not be executed. Okay, so there's a little screen capture image, right? I divide by 0. It's a terminating error. And my write host command does not run, right? So you notice a little semicolon in between them. If you were to do a return, like if you're running in your text editor and you do one line after the other, the write host would not run. So that's a little image I'm going to show here. Again, you're going to see some of this stuff in the demo, so stay tuned. All right, non-terminating errors. These are the tricky ones, right? Generally generated by internal commandlets, and they're normally automatically handled by them. But the error does not terminate the execution of the pipeline. So, while this is super useful and it means that your script doesn't stop, it also means that you may not get your desired behavior. And I'm going to show some of this when we get to the live demo. So, terminating stops the following command from running. Non-terminating, hey, I'm going to throw this error, but I'm still going to let you continue on. Okay, and you can see that here. I run new object foo. It doesn't know what that is. Semicolon, write host hello, and you can see in my command window here that we still get the hello printed out to the console. All right. ErrorAction thingies, right? So some things that you're going to need to know is when I have a non-terminating error, what is the default behavior? So here I can tell you, ErrorAction preference is a non-global variable. It only responds to non-terminating errors, and it is console and script specific. So if you type out ErrorAction preference, you hit return, it's going to tell you what the default is. Right now, generally speaking, if you've done nothing with your PowerShell profile, your default behavior is continue, which is fantastic. That means that if you have a non-terminating error, we're going to continue on and run your script, right? So just be aware that's what the default is. The ErrorAction parameter, it is specific to a command, right? Command, not something that PowerShell can run, but an actual command, right? So 1 divided by 0 is not a command, that's just math, and PowerShell does that natively. So it's not going to be able to attach itself to just some math. So, but it'll be specific to a command or commandlet. So it will override the default or the current ErrorAction preference, right? So you have in your script, you might, not set ErrorAction preference, therefore it's continue. But on a command, you might want to run a stop. And that will stop the execution of the script and prevent anything from after that running. Useful information to know. The options you have for the ErrorAction parameter and the ErrorAction preference are silently continue, stop, continue, right? It's going to tell you, but it's not going to be silent. And then you have inquire, ignore, suspend, and break. All right. I've been doing this PowerShell thing for many years, over a decade, and I can tell you the only 3 I've ever used are silently continue, stop, and continue. Never in my career have I ever used inquire, ignore, suspend, or break. So certainly go home, Google what those other options might be, and you'll probably also never use them, right? So we're going to focus in on silently continue, stop, and continue in today's demos. All right, try and catch. This is going to be super useful, right? Here's kind of what it looks like. We're going to say try, and inside of that try area, we're going to run a command. If that command runs successfully, we're going to ignore the catch, okay? And we're going to continue on. If that running of a command throws an error, we are going to capture that error. We have an option to pull some information from that error. We might, choose to log about it, but it allows you to continue on, right? So whatever's after this try will then continue on. Now, try and catch go together, right? Catch is required with a try. This is very important. And if you're using VS Code, it will absolutely tell you, hey, dummy, you need to add your catch block. Finally is optional. You do not need a finally block. And I can tell you that while developing this presentation, I learned something. And that is that finally will run no matter what. I was under the assumption, and wrongfully so, that finally would run only if we caught an error. And I was wrong. So I can tell you now that if you try to run a command, and whether there's an issue or whether there's not an issue, no matter what, the finally block will run. Good news is I've got a good example of this in my demo, and you'll get to see it kind of live. All right, but again, catch is there only if there's an issue, right? If there is no issue, if there's no error, Catch is not executed, and that's good to know. All right, so the first demo we're going to do is we're going to jump right into PowerCLI. We are roughly 10 minutes in. We are good on time. And again, all of these examples are in my GitHub repo. My demo, we're running on my laptop. Well, actually running on a desktop here, but VMware Explorer, I will be running on my laptop. We have a PowerShell console, and then we also have the vCenter simulator as a Docker container, right? So everything's contained. I'm not connecting to anything remote. If you've never heard of the vCenter simulator, you need to kind of Google it out. I have a blog on my repo. I have a blog out there on an article on my blog. You can check out William Lamb. He's the one, I'm pulling his image. This is a great little thing just to kind of test out some basic scenarios. It doesn't have the full API. It's actually SOAP-based. It's written in Go. It is not the full REST API. Hopefully, maybe there's something out there now. I don't know. But for my demo, everything's running inside of my laptop, and we're going to use a PowerShell console to connect to it. For the very first time ever in a demo, I'm going to attempt to use VS Code as my execution, not PowerShell Windows. So that is something new, and if you've ever seen a demo from me, you know that I absolutely hate what is about to happen. So here we go. We're going to jump in, and I'm going to show you what we got going on here. First thing is we have a setup, and you can see I'm going to run Docker run. Going to open up the, on 443, we're going to open up the Docker container. And this I'm going to run over here just to show you that it doesn't matter whether you do this in your PowerShell console or whether you were to do it here inside the terminal. And now what I can do is connect to it. So let me show you this real quick. Right, so Docker desktop, you can see, gives you the old two-step name. It's running this image, and it's running on 443. Right, so this is something that, you know, over time Docker's really improved upon, and I really like that you can go in and see what containers you have running. But this isn't about Docker. This is about PowerCLI. So now we will execute this code. So F8, gotta love it. All right, so now I am connected to this Docker container that's simulating the vCenter. So before I jump into any of my intros or anything else, I am going to just run some basic commands that you can see what we have going on. So let me clear the screen, and you can see that we have virtual machines, we have clusters, things available to us. So that's fantastic. You know, for the PowerCLI demo, we are now set up, we are executing, we're ready to go. So I'm going to jump in and just start talking about some of these things that we mentioned during the slides. All right, so default behaviors, right? I've done absolutely nothing to these PowerShell consoles, and you'll see that the default behavior, is continue. And if I run the same thing down here, and I run an F8, we get continue, right? So our default behavior, I've done nothing with my consoles, nothing with my integrated terminal. We are continue all the way. Now, what does that tell us? We run this guy, it's going to tell us that there's an error, but it continued on. So if I actually add something, and I run these two lines, you're going to see that this should appear actually does appear. How about that? All right, so continue is super useful, right? But what if I don't want all of that red stuff, right? I mean, who wants to see that in their console, right? If you're running a script, whether it be PowerShell 5, PowerShell 7, whatever it is, who wants to see this red crap, you know, as output, right? That's terrible, right? Like, one, you're taking up screen space of actual potentially useful information, and two, it's ugly. Nobody wants to see red. We want to see green. Green is good, right? Whether it be money, whether it be log messages, green is good. So what we can do is actually set our ErrorAction preference to silently continue. All right. Now, if we run this same command, let me copy this down here real quick so you can see this. Right now, so it posts the command that we're going to run, and then it actually writes the right. So it writes the text out. Notice there's no red stuff. All right. I want you to pay attention to something real quick. We set the ErrorAction preference to silently continue inside of the integrated terminal. Now what I'm telling you is that this is not a global setting. So if I do ErrorAction preference anywhere else, it still maintains the same value. So I have a couple terminals open. I can show you what that is, right? So we are still continue in the other consoles, right? So this is, a session is a weird word, but it is console specific. All right. We're going to set it back to continue so that we can show you the next piece. We're going to divide by 0, right? Whoever has divided by 0. Is it smart? I know you're all shaking your head. The answer is no, right? So now this is a system level error, not a commandlet error. But again, if we set it back to silently continue, and now we can make that disappear. Now notice there's an empty line there, so there was something that was thrown, but nothing that's going to break our execution. For demo purposes, we're going back to what we should be. We're going back to continue. All right. And just to show you, we are back to continue. All good. We're going to clear that screen out. All right. So you've kind of seen the basic behaviors from a PowerShell perspective, but now we're going to kind of add in some of the PowerCLI things, some of the things you need to think about. All right. So we are already connected to the vCenter, so I'm not going to run this. Otherwise, it's going to tell me that I need to connect to it again. So the first thing we're going to do is run a get VM. You already saw me run this. It gives me a list of VMs back. I don't really understand the 0.031 memory GB, but we're going to play around with some of these settings to kind of give you what the experience is from a code writing perspective. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to search for a VM that doesn't exist. Right? This is probably something that's pretty similar that you might run into in your environment when you're looking for something or trying to solve a problem. All right, it comes back and it tells you, well, this VM with the name my VM was not found. That's fantastic information to know. But if I'm, giving it a list of, 100 VMs, do I really want this to be spit out? Probably not. But I also may not want to stop the execution, right? So I'm going to want to make sure that I continue. And you'll notice the same thing, right? So again, the default behavior was continue, and on this command on line 11, I said just continue. I haven't changed the default behavior. What I'm interested in is that I don't want to see that red stuff. So I'm going to say silently continue. Now you'll notice no red stuff. So this is good and bad, right? So think about this from a scripting perspective. I'm going to loop through, 100 VMs. One of them doesn't exist. Am I going to tell somebody? Am I not going to tell somebody? So I've just not told somebody because I silently continued. All right, so let's get into a little bit about why this is important. So messing with like the most basics of scripts, right? So I'm going to write host. I'm going to put a message out there. I'm going to get a list of VMs. And then I'm going to write that my script is complete, right? I'm showing that I've ended the execution. Boom, here we go. So let's mess with a script. I print out the contents of get VM, and then I write and say that my script is complete. All right. So now let's search for that same VM that doesn't exist. What's the behavior going to be? All right, well, it didn't list any VMs out because we got an error because we couldn't find my VM. But it still said the start message and it said the stop message. Is that useful, right? Again, thinking back to like pseudocode, how do you want your script to behave? So if we say, right, we add in our ErrorAction parameter and we say stop, what's going to happen now? So you'll notice we still get the same red error, but we don't get the completion line, right? It doesn't actually write out the script is complete. So down here, that piece is missing right here. Good information to know, right? So now I can stop the execution if I don't find something I don't like. Or if I find something I do like, I can stop. All right, if I'm looping through a bunch of VMs, what if I want to silently continue? What happens now? So now it says we're going to start the script and we finish. I haven't told you any in between, right? So again, this example is very specific and we're looking for a VM that doesn't exist. In some of my further examples, you're going to see how we kind of can make use of this. All right. So now we are going to try and make this really ugly. So we're going to write host that we're adding some logic. We're getting the list of VMs. And then we're no ErrorAction preference, so we're going to continue. And then we're going to say if the VM list is empty, we're going to say that it's empty. Otherwise, we're going to return VM list. All right. So what do you think what's going to happen here? I already know. Spoiler alert. All right. So this is one of the reasons I don't like the terminal, right? So I think that it's just going to execute it, but it actually like pastes it in and then it executes it. It's really ugly. All right. So we start here. We say, let's add some logic. As you can see here, let's add some logic. We're going to get the VM list. This tells me that, hey, I can't get your VM list because my VM doesn't exist. And then we move down because we said continue. And we're going to say, well, if it's empty, we're going to return this line. And sure enough, because we had an error and VM list is actually empty, no VMs were returned. And then we had continue. So now we are all done. So what if we added some logic and some smarts, right? Because we are smart system administrators. So we're going to silently continue. We're going to get rid of that red crap. I don't want to see it. And that's going to make me feel a little bit better, right? Because I don't want to have to go back and scroll through a bunch of stuff and find red stuff. Here we go. Let's add some logic and smarts. That's my line here. If this errors out, we're going to silently continue. And now we have no VMs returned. So we're all done. And we're not going to take any action. All right. So now we are going to try and change this up a little bit. We're going to print out the ErrorAction preference. I'm giving you the list of VMs. And then we're going to try to stop each one of these VMs. All right. Here we go. So going back up, our ErrorAction preference is to continue. We're going to attempt to stop the VMs. We'll go through each of the VMs that I listed, right? So just pay attention here. I didn't do a get VM. I want to be specific. I'm trying to show you the errors. And now we're showing you that we're going to loop through each one of these VMs and attempt to stop it. Now, this one tells me that could not stop the VM, stop VM. And then it says it cannot be found for the parameter VM. So fantastic, you've given me the error. And then you've turned off the ones that are good, right? So if we do a get VM, we can now see that 3 out of the 4 VMs on the vCenter simulator have been powered off. All right. Now we're going to attempt to turn them off again. And I expect that we're going to see similar behavior. And you can see that we added the ErrorAction stop, which means the first time we can't power off a VM, we are stopping the execution. So ask yourself, is this the behavior that you're expecting? Is this the behavior that you want? I'm going to guess that the answer is no. And that's why we're going to move on to trying and catching things. So the first part here is we're going to start up all the VMs, get back to the current or the original operating state. And you can see we have all of our VMs. They're all back powered on. Now, the next thing is using the same list of VMs, including the my VM that doesn't exist, we're going to try to stop the VMs again, okay? Now, what you'll see is that I'm trying here and catching here. And this is important to note, right? So I'm trying something, and if it doesn't work, I'm capturing that there was a problem, and I'm logging that there was a problem. So let's get this started. Here we go. Now you'll notice no red, right? I'm not returning all this red crap that you're going to see in the screen, and everyone's going to be happy because your manager's going to see that your screen came back and there's no red. But you'll notice when you look at this, right, our error action is still continue. We've stopped the first 2 VMs. When we didn't find my VM, it tells me that, hey, this VM didn't power off. It doesn't say it doesn't exist because I didn't check for that, but it's saying it didn't power it off, and then we move on to the next one. All right, I'm going to power these guys back on, and we're going to get a little bit fancier. All right, so we have the same list of VMs. We are going to try and stop the VM. We're going to try and set the VM configuration to 4 CPU and 12 gigs of memory, and then we're going to start that VM back up. Okay? And if we find an error, we're going to try and capture the message that it receives. So, here we go. It's going to take a couple seconds while it runs through each one of the VMs. All right. So now we're getting some good input, or good output, right? ErrorAction preferences continue. I put that in yellow. Now we're going to loop through each one of the VMs. So we're looping through this set of VMs, saying we're going to stop the VM. We attempt to stop the VM. And if that fails, we go to the catch block. Okay? If it succeeds, we write that the VM is off, we update the configuration, and then we start that VM back up. So, looking down at the output, we stopped the first VM, we said that it's off, we never logged that we power the VM back on. That's bad on my part. That might be fixed with finally, who knows. All right, and then we go through the second VM, everything works correctly. Now we're stopping my VM, the VM did not power off. We show the error message at the time, and we actually capture the exception that it could not find the virtual machine with the name myVM. Fantastic. And then the third one, everything goes as expected. So let's clear this out. We're going to go back down. Are we done? We are not, right? Otherwise, there would be no more text in here. All right, so what can we do differently? Well, if we run the command, we can stop, and we can see that this will work when we get rid of the VM does not power off. Okay, so interestingly enough, this one did not power off, and we were unable to update it. So now you can see when I run this get VM, we can see that we have some VMs in the correct state and some VMs not the correct state. The correct state being the memory and CPU configuration. So we're kind of learning the gist of how try and catch can work and can get coupled with the ErrorAction command, right? So, I can force the execution to stop, catch that error, but still process my for each. That's really what I'm trying to show here, right? You don't want your for each to end if you've got a full list of VMs. All right, so now we're going to add in the finally block. I only have one example here. And what we're going to do is we're going to attempt to stop the VMs, and we're going to, right, so if the VM is already off, that's fine, right? That's what I'm saying. We're going to power that VM back on. So we stop the VM, we set the configuration to 4 and 12. If we run into an error, we're going to say that the VM did not power off, but we're going to run this finally block, right? So now we're going to power that VM back on. So that's something new that we've added, right? So no matter what happens, whether it's good or whether it's bad, we're going to power that VM back on. So think about a large deployment or a large upgrade. You're going through and you have to touch 100 VMs, and some of them will work with the configuration. Maybe some of them didn't power off, whatever that problem is. You're going to attempt to power that VM back on. So let's run through this, and let's see what kind of errors we get. So VM2 didn't power off, so that's fine. You'll see that I'm writing out in green that we did actually reach the finally block. So you'll notice that before we got started, this second VM was already powered off, right? So when stop VM runs, it doesn't encounter an error because the VM is powered off, which kind of seems silly to me, right? So if I say, hey, stop this VM, and the VM is already stopped, it should know that it's an invalid power state. But regardless, at the end of the day, what I wanted was all of these VMs to have 4 CPUs and 12 gigs of RAM, and that's what I have, and they are all powered back on. So you can see that running the finally, at the end of the day, is a successful script. All right. So now I'm going to kind of work a little backwards and go through a couple different scenarios. So what we're going to do, the first thing is disconnect from the VI server. Right? We are no longer connected, and now I kind of run through some common errors that I see, through my team when I'm just teaching somebody how to write PowerCLI, or even stuff that I've encountered myself, right? The first thing being that, what if I try to, one of the things that you may not know is that connect VI server, the default behavior is continue. If you don't check that you're connected to a vCenter, you can continue to run all of your PowerCLI not connected to a vCenter. And if your ErrorAction preferences continue, you will continue to encounter errors, even though you never connected to the vCenter. So think about that for a minute and what kind of problems that might cause. So I'm going to run through some scenarios where you can check to see that you actually connected the vCenter. All right. So the first one is I'm setting the VM list that we've used in previous examples to null because this is important to me. I'm setting the ErrorAction preference back to continue, also important to me. And now I'm going to connect to a VI server of, basically local host, no port, using a crappy username and password. All right, and then I'm going to run the get VM command. So my question is, what's going to happen? All right, so to highlight this, the connect VI server command fails. It said it could not resolve the requested vCenter, right? It couldn't connect to 0.0.0.0 on no port, right? Second thing that happened is this get VM failed. So my question to you is, why did we run get VM if we didn't connect to the vCenter, right? So think about this when you're writing your scripts. If you never connect to if the first thing doesn't happen, why would you ever try the second? All right, so the second piece, second example, right? So now I'm going to connect to, I'm actually going to do some little spooky stuff here, and I'm going to get the IP address of the Docker container, and then I'm going to connect to it, and then I'm going to look for this little property called is connected that's tied to the default VI server. So this will tell me whether or not I'm connected to the vCenter. And if it is still up and running, gotta love live demos. This is why I hate the absolutely hate the integrated terminal. There we go. So trying it again, you'll see we are connected. We can now take over the world. Fantastic. All right, so now this is, example 3 is similar to example 1, except we are going to ErrorAction stop on this connect VI server. So first we're going to disconnect because I don't want to show you that we have the connection. And now it says, hey, we tried to connect to the VI server. We are not running the get VM, right? We're done. We stopped. And then here, example number 4, there are a ton of options out there. I'm showing you a couple different ones. Not all of them are right, but some of them are definitely wrong. So here's just another option for what we're going to do. We're going to connect to the VI server. We're going to stop a VM, and then we're going to attempt to stop the VM and then set all of the options for it, right? So all of our VMs, based on this, right, get the VM list, and then for each VM in that list, we're going to stop it. We're going to set it to 1 CPU, 4 gigs of memory, and then we're going to start the VM back up. Now, we are not currently connected, so I can't run get VM. So why don't we do that real quick? So before this runs, let's execute this. I'm going to show you get VM real quick. You can see that all 4 VMs have 4 gigs of, or 12 gigs of memory and 4 CPU. And we are going to turn one of these VMs off and run a script that I think that most people would probably run and think that it's going to be perfectly okay. So here we go. So we're going to get the VM list, and for each of those, we're going to stop it, set the VM, and start it back up. Uh-oh. So you see we got a little red error there. All right. So you can see that because we stopped the VM, it's still powered through because the default action is continue, because I never set it to stop. All right, let's run this again. So ErrorAction is going to be stopped. We've already connected. Let's power that guy off, and now let's run this again. Even recorded demos don't always go according to plan. All right, so now we have had ErrorAction stop. We've stopped our script. We show the get VM. They were all set to what it was before because I never set them. So let's do some. They're all powered on. So this will work better now. All right. So now we're going to change them up a little bit. You'll see the better output this time. Troubleshooting on the fly. Gotta love it. All right. So now you can see the first VM was updated because it was powered on at the time that we ran our script. The second VM was not. And we said ErrorAction stop is our default ErrorAction preference. Therefore, nothing else ran. So now we got machines in all kinds of a funky state. So that's no fun. All right. So now, there's been a lot of talk about one-liners and things that you do with PowerShell, and I'm not a fan of one-liners. So this little script here from 40 to 45 is something that you'd probably see out in the field somewhere where someone's going to run a script and get some results back. And I'm going to tell you that this next thing where I have it named fixed script is the same concept with a lot of error handling. Okay, so we're going to go from 5-6 lines to a lot more than that. Here we go. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to disconnect from the VI server, and now we're going to say set your ErrorAction to stop for this script, and then we have a try on the connect VI server. We have a try on the get VM list, and then inside of my for each VM that's received, I have a try and a catch to stop the VM. I have a try and a catch for setting the VM if the power state is off. Otherwise, I'm going to throw an error that the VM was not powered off. And then finally, I'm going to power that VM back on. And then I'm going to print the list out. So you're going to see that for those 5 or 6 lines that you saw on the previous one, we've gone nuclear. And let's see what happens. And we're back to this stupid terminal thing. I don't understand why it does that. Hopefully in my live session somebody can inform me. So here we go. So we print out the list of VMs and I go through one by one. This error message says, hey, you're not in the right power state. Doesn't really matter. We're going to edit the VM. And now you can see all of them are set to 2 and 8. So we've now written a script that we can handle any error that we could encounter, right? If we don't connect to the VI server, we're not going to run the rest of this crap. So one of the things you can see is that even inside of a try catch, you can run a throw. And if you throw, that means the script will terminate unless you catch that throw, right? So this try catch is not wrapped inside of another try catch, but you could do that. So this gets back to, my early statement where I said, if you have an understanding of what you want the script behavior to be, you can code it out, as complicated as it might get, to perform the behavior exactly as you described. All right, we are done with the PowerCLI for now. Hopefully you've gotten a pretty good glimpse of what's going on. And now we're going to hop back to the slide real quick. I'm going to show you that we're going to do another demo that's eerily simple or eerily similar as the previous one. So I have my own module called RestPS. It just provides a RESTful interface all in PowerShell. We're going to use it inside of a console, all inside of my laptop, and we're going to connect to it through the integrated terminal in VS Code. Probably wasn't worth going to a slide for that, but we're all good. So we're going to set up the API. So I've got my little command here. All you have to do is install the module, and you'll be able to run this command. And then there's an install command. There's a whole blog post on this, so if you want to see it, look at my blog. So here we go. We're going to run this guy. And then this is super chatty, right? So I'm just going to minimize this. We can come back to this in a few minutes. And now we're going to jump into the API demo. So all of the commands that we were talking about with the try, the catch, the error action preference, all of those apply to PowerShell, right? So it doesn't matter whether you're integrating with PowerCLI or you're integrating with a RESTful API. So now we're going to jump over to a RESTful API and show you that all of these things are the same. So let me clear this out real quick. And I can show you that we have invoke web request. I'm just going to my local host. I opened that RESTful interface on 8080. So you can see here's my routes file path. We can take a look at that file. Let's look at it now, right? Why not? So let's see. If we go to C, RESTPS, endpoints in this JSON file, I'm going to open that with code. Whoop, it doesn't like that. We're going to open that with Notepad++. We're going to move that over here. So it's really just a JSON file that it describes what script I want to run when you hit the endpoint, and the endpoint being the fully qualified domain name, port, and then path, right? So in this case, you have endpoint status, endpoint routes, endpoint process, and when process is going to run this invoke get process script, which happens to return PowerShell scripts or PowerShell processes. So when we go back to our API demo here, we're going to run an invoke web request, and we're going to get the content of that command. Again, we're running this against 8080, and we're saying get all of the names or all of the processes with the name PowerShell. This is pretty ugly. Again, it's invoke web request, so it's returning like a blob or a JSON object. It's not really great. So I'm going to show you the invoke REST method, which will clean that up a little bit. And now, let me clear that screen. Let me run that again. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the way that this pasted in there, but you can see the return comes back process name, ID, main window title. So these are all the PowerShell processes that are running on my machine that's being returned from the RESTful interface that I created. Now, why is this important? So here we're going to be capturing an error. So this one is running on 8080, and this command that I'm going to run here is running on 8081. Why is that important? Because when I run this, it's going to tell me, hey dummy, we can't find that remote server, right? So now it tells me that the error message is unable to connect to the remote server because I've captured that error message in the return variable exception.message. So if you've ever run an error or run a command and you've wanted to know what the error would be, you can start capturing information in this exception.message. So let me see. I'm not sure this will actually, yeah, so it's one of those goofy things that you'll have to kind of explore yourself. All right, and now we can do the same thing with errors for a route not found. So run this, and now you can see that we get a 404. So you can see the same principles we apply to PowerCLI, we can apply to working with PowerShell and using invoke REST method and invoke web request. And in that catch block, you can capture all kinds of useful information that's going to help you write better code. So I'm sorry I don't have a whole lot more time, but let's jump back into the slideshow. Just to recap, you have got this. Check out my code, hit me up, ask me questions. I'm super happy to answer any questions that you might have. take your survey. Let me know how we did. Let me know whether you like this session. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed VMware Explorer 2022.